What do you have left? What does the municipality have left, or what do I have left?
You and your fees.
I won't be doing anything unless asked to do so.
Okay. Right.
Yeah, I won't do anything.
Okay, so what did we get so far?
What you just heard.
What do you mean?
So we got a review of the file and a presentation here today?
I have all my notes. It was looking over. I mean, I have basically everything I've done. I can provide, and I have provided the email correspondence, my review notes, all those different things.
John, I have a question about. You said that the needs survey included the surveys that you've been discussing and other information, and I think you mentioned the review of the SEO's records or the township's files would be something that would that be included in the? Would that be other information that would be included in the needs assessment?
Yes, or some description that we don't have. The needs assessment needs to say, well, we don't have any records because we don't have a septic management plan, or I don't know. But that would be very important in that analysis.
And then what other information would like well testing be something that could be in there, or in our case, lake water sampling? Would that be included in there?
Well testing certainly would make sense.
Okay.
And again, even the SEO or whoever's doing the evaluation would look at even isolation distances and maybe see if there's, it would be looking at those various things. Especially if you have the data already, you need to look at that.
Have you looked at the well sampling that was, or the well testing that was done here in this, like if it's in that file, or do you recall that?
I don't recall. I'd have to look through my notes.
If you were going to do well testing, how long of a period would you cover, and would it be like return testing of wells that have tested bad, or is one test enough for a system? You'd
probably test it a couple of times. You're looking for nitrates certainly, but you're looking for any kind of like a bacteria or something like that. Virus coming through, that type of thing.
I guess my question is, if you shock a system after it tests positive, you shock it and then it doesn't test positive, does that mean that the contamination would be coming from maybe a cracked casing or something other than septic
There can
infiltration?
Be surface contamination, certainly, yeah. I mean, there could be a lot of different, if you're in a floodplain and it flooded or something like that, there can be contamination. I'm not saying that's the case here, but there's you try to narrow down what the source is. And that's what isolation distances are basically required minimum distances from a well to a septic system, or a well or a septic system, let's say, to your neighbor's property, or there's a septic system from various things, open water, a pool, or something like that. Yeah.
What responsibility does Lemon and Titanic Township have to use the sewer? You said they had inspectors. Are they just registered? Is there no jurisdiction? Is there no guidance to say they have to enforce septic inspections or septic pumping? Or
I don't think
sounds like they have the policy, they have the officers, but there's no.
When you're proposing, you go in for a building permit. And you're proposing an on-lot system because that's how you're going to basically treat the sewage. An SEO will come out to witness the testing, basically the excavation. You're going to do some infiltration testing, some pit bailing if it's a high groundwater area, those type of things, and that's what the SEO is witnessing. Municipalities with SEOs don't always have the septic management plan where they go out later and look and evaluate, the performance of these systems. That's what I'm talking about in a needs assessment. You'd be getting those inspection reports.
So the only time in Lemon Township that they inspected is during a house sale? Because that's what happened with mine. When we bought our house, the system failed, so we had to put in a new on-location sewage system, basically what we had. So you just bought a house, right? Did they inspect yours?
I paid for my own.
Okay. But the township didn't come in and inspect?
No, they don't do anything.
I wonder why they did with mine.
I think that's unusual.
They did with ours when we had our he came over and inspected.
We're good there?
Well, that was new.
Well, it was
new.
replaced.
Yeah, not when we bought it, they didn't do anything.
No.
The SEO will certainly look at it in terms of, again, the pre-testing before the initial construction of the system. It varies certainly among townships what they do next, whether they evaluate it every 5 years or what goes on. And then certain municipalities probably do have an automatic, when there's a land transfer, they probably take a look at it, or there's all kinds of different municipalities have a certain right to have certain inspections of septic systems because of why is a municipality created.
They have a responsibility, not the right.
But they don't have a duty.
Well, it comes down to health and safety issues. So a municipality, I serve on a planning board, and my first thing that comes to my mind when I'm on a planning board is that I'm representing the other citizens, and we're health and safety. That's basically why we exist. We don't exist for much else other than people's health and safety. So as density gets greater, then I would say absolutely you have to have some kind of policy on that. Only because what are the impacts to failing septic systems? So, yes.
Just a comment. My observation from everything I've heard from you here today is that we need a good assessment plan, or we need a good assessment of the systems that exist. And that I think you support 537 planning to be as comprehensive, as detailed, and as complete as possible to come up with the best alternative.
Sure.
So what I would glean from this then would be that this association should be extremely supportive of completing an Act 537, maybe with going back and updating the assessment that was done by Mr. Shoup. And we should be doing that rather than trying to kill an Act 537 plan to just support the current status quo.
I would always be in favor of updating 537 plans, and not just because I'm a consultant. I do that work, believe me. And then but time changes things. There's more people, there's more properties developed, there's different conditions. You've over the years collected more data, hopefully, on conditions within the area, and all of that leads to. It makes sense to update things. Again, would you do a whole municipal system? Maybe so. Maybe there's now external pressures on the area that there's a lot more people around. I'm not referring to anything here, but there might be a lot more people coming. There might be a lot of things going on. There might be new housing demands. There might be a whole lot of things going on. So I'll tell you when most 537 plans happen. Most of these special studies or updates to 537 plans come when a developer comes into a town and the 537 plan has some age to it, and they absolutely need to update the 537 plan to do what they propose to do. That's generally, so it's kind of funny when like Arrowhead was not in that situation. Everything was subdivided. They had a wastewater treatment plant, all these other things. So you go into a town and they're like, well, what do you have in mind? And we're like, well, nothing. We have to update this because we want to run some new lines, and it's been a long time since this has been evaluated. And they got caught with their pants down when they put in some lines. I had nothing to do with. They put in some lines they thought they had a permit to put in, and they didn't, but they ran the lines. The community went in for a building permit at the township to build a new lodge, and they said, well, we're going to tie into sewer. And the town's like, well, we don't have any sewer in this part of our town. And they're like, yeah, you do. We put it in. They're like, well, how'd you do that? That's how this whole thing got started with the 537 plan. But in general, there's usually an impetus to do something with the 537 plan. It usually doesn't just be like, oh, you know what, this year we have nothing we're better doing, and we'll just do a 537 plan. So, or the DEP might say, hey, look, this plan's getting 20 years old, and you guys need to update this thing. So those are the type of things that trigger this thing. Now, I don't know. I'd have to think about, once you've started the process and you have an incomplete process, what you do next. Now, it seems like certainly a pressing issue in the area, and it seems like it would make some sense to really complete the effort. I was asked by your association if what's already been done could just be submitted to DEP and on we go. This is in no shape to submit to DEP. I mean, I can say that unequivocally. It just is not even close. What I've evaluated. So that's it's not there yet.
Are you saying we should repeat the same process that we went through to get this incomplete information? We should start over and do it again?
Well, it wouldn't be you. It wouldn't be you. It'd be the municipalities. And again,
Okay, so the municipalities hire the inspector?
the municipality would have to be comfortable with a person they hire that has the credentials and can actually deliver a product that is solid to form a real strong needs
So
assessment.
it seems to me that the key here is to hire an inspector who is either more thorough or has better qualifications, because I'm assuming that from the perspective of the information you're going to get from the homeowner, it's probably still going to be either incomplete or they don't know, or for whatever reason they're not going to be forthcoming about it.
That's true. It's a combination. The interview is just a piece of the overall evaluation. It's the inspector, the inspector and the inspections. Again, you're doing some homework. You're looking at the area, the geology, the records in the town, if there are any complaints and different things. You're looking, and then you're going out in the field with that knowledge and with that experience that you've had in doing this more than once. And you're going into the field, and then you're making the observations that you have.
But the inspectors are not doing a physical inspection of the septic system.
They're doing a non-invasive inspection, which means
That's just looking for those standing water and all that.
they're going up to the system, they're walking on it, they're smelling, they're touching if they want, and you're basically evaluating without taking a shovel or an excavator and digging. You're not. An invasive test would be one that you're going into a failing system and trying to figure out why it's not working.
So we have no way of knowing if this process were repeated, if the results would be any different than they are here.
Well, and that's the whole point. That's a huge message then you're getting is this needs assessment needs to be done really well, because that forms the basis of everything you do from then on. That's the value of it. The needs assessment sounds like a small piece, but if you don't get that done right and you don't really have a good evaluation done, then you're just sort of you're going on your way without any real you just don't have a foundation to work from.
This is a local situation, and I'm sure you don't have the answer to this, but it seems to me that Lemon didn't pay their part of what Tunkhannock Township has spent already. And I'm wondering, if that's true, whether they'd be willing to pay a sewage enforcement officer to do a needs assessment. And Tunkhannock Township has got to send out Carlton Shute, who is certified, without his sidekick, who was part of this. And then we have to be part of the ongoing, we've got to get a person to evaluate what these two are doing as it's being done, so that everybody's going to be honest about it.
Yeah. If I shouldn't be needed is kind of what I'm saying. My work, if everything was, if things were done well, then I would have nothing to say.
It's kind of hard for us to...
Other than compliment the people doing the work.
Want to do it right.
John,
See, this is the problem we have.
John, can I ask you a question? Based on the amount of what has been spent to date, it's like something over $138,000 or something like that by the township.
Not by me.
No, by the township.
I'm just kidding.
And I think $60,000 or just over $60,000 is spent with the engineer that designed the central sewer system. Is that a reasonable amount of money to have spent on the design of the central sewer system given the place that they're at in the 537 plan?
I don't think they should have spent a cent until they had the plan, until they had, this is taking step by step. The needs, you go into the 537 plan, you go through the 537 plan process, and then you get into the sewer, which is, again, that may be a valid alternative, but you don't do that until you do the background.
And so if the 537 plan were to continue, would you recommend they continue with the same consultant that got them this work to date?
I can't speak, I haven't seen anything by the central sewer engineer or that.
Yeah.
I just haven't seen that work, so I can't even tell you if it was good
But I
work
guess
or not.
the consultant that compiled what you have reviewed, if that's what's been compiled since 2007, and they've spent $138,000 to do it, is that a reasonable amount of time and a reasonable amount of money for what you've got?
I would say, again, whoever's giving guidance on this whole effort I would not give high marks for it.
Okay.
And I don't know, I don't know, I could say other things, but that's the best I can say.
One last question here. We've kept you long enough.
Sure.
Is there a certain time of the year that's best to do the assessments of the septic system?
Yeah, certainly, I wouldn't do it during the winter time. Only because of frozen precipitation, snow cover. Snow cover is definitely not when you want to be out there. Because you're not able to see things like you are otherwise. There are certain times that you have to consider what's going on. If it's a wet spring, then you need to work that around what you're inspecting, and that goes into your evaluation. Would I pick August, or would I pick right now when there's been very little rain? Well, that's going to probably underdo what you're seeing. You want a system. Keep in mind, with all the conditions during the year, you want the system functioning. You don't want to say, well, this system doesn't work 3 months because of frozen ground or high groundwater. Either that system shouldn't have been there in the first place, or it's not performing. So, yeah, I would say definitely there are certain times that you want to avoid. But any time you do it, you need to fill in on the form, and you need to say what the conditions are at that time. It's very important to do that. With any inspection, structural inspections, dam inspections, every single form has, what were the conditions, who was there, who was, looking over the project, what equipment was being used, was there a thunderstorm, 10 minutes before I started my work? Did I check in with anyone? Is there, what's going on? Because, 3 years later, you're going to think, I looked at that system, but geez, I can't remember what the conditions were like that day. You got to get it down on paper. You got to make a record of it. Otherwise, it's these inspections were done in '07. If I went to the person inspecting and I said, well, here's what you did. Did you do this? What did the thing look like? Do you have a little sketch on there that shows where it was? And it's not there. And just your memory, you do enough work, and then eventually you're like, well, I kind of remember that, but I'm not really sure what was going on.
Very good, John. Thank you very much. Appreciate you. Go enjoy your vacation with your in-laws.